may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Let's get this going. Let's talk about one of my favorite teams in the NFL. More importantly, one of my favorite teams to be targeting in fantasy football in 2021. And yes, guys, I know I say I am not a fan of any NFL team in particular. Don't think I'm a 49ers fan. It's more so they have some players I really like rooting for. So, of course, I'm going to find myself rooting for them more times than not. But what I need from y'all is I need you to go down to the comment section and please let me know what you think of these two ideas. The first idea is what we are doing in this video. Let me know how y'all think it plays out, and please be brutally honest. If you do not like this video concept, you need to let me know, or I'm going to be doing it for nobody and everybody's going to hate it. So please, if you hate it, let me know in the comment section. But I think it would be a fun idea for over the next month, pretty much just break down almost every team in the NFL, do a buy, sell, hold video. That way we can really dive into the team. We can try to identify what pieces we are actually wanting to target and what pieces we are wanting to avoid. And also, going forward, I think a lot of videos with what we're going to do now that we have so many people over on the Flock Patreon is we are going to be accepting video calls where it's not a live call, but what you are doing instead is it's kind of like a voicemail where you're sending me a video with a question that you have. I'll play it at the beginning of the YouTube video, and then I'll go through answering your question in depth from Patreon on the YouTube channel. But please let me know what you think of both of those ideas. Let me know if you think I'm wasting my time. And also, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. You know what to do. Let's dive into it. Let's get our buy, sell, and hold for the 49ers. And let's start it off with a tight end that I loved going into 2020. He was my tight end 1 overall. And yes, he let us down, but it wasn't his fault. Let's go over to George Kittle. Okay, so George Kittle, I mean, it's hard to call him a buy just because we know the price is going to be very high regardless. At the beginning of the offseason, I was saying that George Kittle was going to be a player that I was higher than consensus on because you were looking around, you were looking at initial rankings, and a lot of people had George Kittle as the tight end 3. And those dynasty formats, I was looking at it going, hey, George Kittle is easily the tight end 1. You could make the argument that he's the tight end 1 for redraft 2021 fantasy football as well. So we were all in on Kittle. But now it looks like some other people have kind of, I don't want to say hopped on the bandwagon just because it's a really easy piece of analysis to look at what George Kittle has done in the recent past and go, hey, this is a player that's still in his prime. This is a player that should be at the very top of the tight end ranking totem pole. And yeah, now that's where his price point is. If you want to draft George Kittle, he is most likely going to be either the first, second, or third tight end off the board at the very latest, depending on your draft. And it's a fair price for that reason. I'm saying to hold George Kittle. I mean, you can't really raise him up much higher than he's already going. But if we dive into exactly how dominant Kittle has been in games that he's actually played over the past few years, the numbers are kind of surprising. In that if you look at the full games played in 2020 for George Kittle, I will say the sample size is not large. I mean, he got halfway hurt through week 1 as well as through week 8. So we're going to take those weeks out of it, and we are just going to look at the full weeks that he played through 4, 5, 6, and 7. So if you take those 4 weeks and you go, what was George Kittle ranked in points per game here? In that 4-week stretch, George Kittle was the number 1 tight end in fantasy. Now, I know it's a very small sample. I know you don't want to be extrapolating small samples over the course of the entire season, as that's really how you just kind of lose in fantasy football. But in the case of Kittle, I think it's kind of a safe thing to do because if you take a step back, I mean, this is a player that's been elite for a very long time now. I mean, if you go to 2019, he was neck and neck with Travis Kelce for that tight end 1 spot overall. He finished as the tight end 2, but he was in that same tier. And now if we are looking across the landscape, we're going, okay, Travis Kelce, I mean, another year older. Yes, I understand Kelce looked better than he's ever looked in 2020. So it's hard to project him to slow down anytime soon. But in the case of George Kittle, I mean, this is a tight end that's only 27 years old. This is a player that you should be expecting not to continue to progress, but you shouldn't be expecting a fall off to come anytime soon. And every single time he's on the field, he is, if not the number 1 tight end in fantasy, the very worst, he's the number 2. So George Kittle, when he's getting drafted in that range, I mean, it's kind of impossible to say he's a buy, but he's definitely not going to be a sell for us. So I think the price point on George Kittle is fair. I'm going to be holding. I'm going to be targeting in drafts. And yeah, let's call George Kittle the hold in this offense. And now let's get to another player that has been around in this offense for a couple years. Let's go over to Deebo Samuel. And here with Deebo Samuel, it is so hard to evaluate him because Samuel is literally playing a completely different position. I mean, it's hard to call him a wide receiver. And I know a lot of people are going to be asking why we are saying that. And it's because how he is used in this Kyle Shanahan offense. Now, if you look at what happened in 2020 with the routes that Deebo Samuel was running and where he was getting targeted on the football field, I mean, we never, and I repeat, never see a tight end getting targeted this close to the line of scrimmage. I mean, if we go through, Deebo Samuel had 44 targets and 97 air yards. Now, if you don't know what an air yard is, it's essentially how far past the line of scrimmage a wide receiver was whenever he got targeted. So say you're Julio Jones, you run 18 yards down the field, Matt Ryan throws you the ball, you catch it, you run another 6 before getting tackled. So that was a 24-yard completion, but at the time you were targeted, you were 18 yards down the field, then you're accounted for 18 air yards. Now, if we are trying to put this on a per target basis, because I know a lot of people are kind of lost with what we were saying right now, essentially, on average, Deebo Samuel is only 2.2 yards past the line of scrimmage at the time he is targeted. Now, that is not only last in the NFL for wide receivers that have over 40 targets, but it's last in the NFL by a very wide margin. I mean, you are not seeing anybody come close to Deebo Samuel with this type of usage in this offense. So we are going, okay, why would Deebo Samuel get helped in this scenario? What would be the case where he is racking up a ton of targets? What would be the case that we would want to target him in fantasy? That case would be in an offense that had a stationary pocket passing quarterback. Because in that scenario, you can just say it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo drops back. He goes through his progressions. First, he looks deep, possibly to Brandon Aiyuk, then to George Kittle. If that is not there, then he doesn't have the capability to get out of the pocket. He doesn't have the capability to extend the play and then try to get a wide receiver deeper downfield open, and he can't run the ball himself. So at that point, then the easiest thing ever is just to look at the guy close to the line of scrimmage, to hit him with the dump off there. And you see this all the time with rushing quarterbacks. If you have a rushing quarterback, I mean, that kind of target just completely gets killed. I mean, if you have a Deshaun Watson's always going to be leading the NFL in air yards. And I know Deshaun Watson has a very talented arm. I understand that he has the arm strength. But at the end of the day, a lot of times the reason he can get those players targeted so deep, far downfield, as well as Russell Wilson, is the fact that they extend plays with their legs. They give those wide receivers running those routes that need time to develop, the actual time to get downfield. So if you're a stationary quarterback, you're going to be checking the ball down a lot more than you are if you are a mobile quarterback. And this is the trend that you see every year in the NFL. And because they have that mobile quarterback with a big arm coming in Trey Lance, I think you look at the kind of targets Deebo Samuel is getting in this offense, and you go, the transition from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance is most likely not going to be a good thing for Deebo Samuel. Now, please let me know if y'all think I am overthinking this, but my initial thought when you dive into the kind of routes that he is running with the new quarterback pair coming in, I think that we have to label Deebo Samuel as the sell in this offense. And I know this is a player that has been plummeting down draft boards. I understand that this is someone that doesn't cost a lot. I mean, he's one of the cheapest players in this offense because I think other people have the same concern. Also, with Deebo Samuel, we know injuries are something you always have to worry about. But nonetheless, I mean, I think that the new quarterback coming in Trey Lance is not going to be a great fit for Deebo Samuel. But let's go over to who I think is actually going to be a great fit with Trey Lance. Let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk here. And with Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, this is the traditional wide receiver you're looking for. This is the wide receiver that last season had 97 targets, 876 air yards. So he, on average, is getting targeted at an average depth of 9 yards a target. Now, that is a number you like to see, especially if you have the Trey Lance player coming in, a player that you think is going to be a little bit more aggressive throwing the ball deep downfield. And another number that I want to point out with Brandon Aiyuk is the fact that he had an insane second half season breakout, and nobody is talking about this. Now, personally, I don't understand why people are not talking about it, but if you just go through and you filter and you go, what wide receivers were most impressive in weeks 8 through 16, the second half of this season? Generally, what you want to see is you want to see some younger players that are breaking out at this time of the year. And that's exactly what happened with Brandon Aiyuk. And I understand George Kittle missed a significant amount of time. George Kittle really didn't play at all during this stretch. And you can say the same thing a lot with Deebo Samuel. So maybe you make the argument that Brandon Aiyuk was just benefiting from the fact that there was nobody else to soak up targets in this offense. But nonetheless, in the second half of the season, Brandon Aiyuk was the wide receiver 5 in points per game. Now, that is a number that I have not heard anywhere else. I do not understand what is happening with Brandon Aiyuk not getting the draft hype right now, because he was a first-round drafted wide receiver last offseason. Then he comes in the second half of his rookie year in a situation where, he's not competing for targets with a lot of players, but he has some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. He is able to be the wide receiver 5 in points per game. Now you have Trey Lance coming in, someone that I think is going to elevate the offense, someone that I think is probably going to be looking to target his wide receivers deeper downfield. So for this, I think you have to label Brandon Aiyuk as a buy this offseason, because he's not going to be cheap, but at the same time, he's not at the very top of draft boards like a George Kittle. So there is some room for you to go and be ahead of consensus and come away with Brandon Aiyuk in a ton of your drafts. Okay, so now let's go over and let's talk about some rookies here, and let's bring up Trey Sermon. Now, Trey Sermon, I just got done writing his in-depth write-up over with our rookie draft guide that should be available later this month on Patreon. Now, with Trey Sermon, you're looking at him as a running back, and it's very exciting to see what the 49ers paid up to get him. I mean, the fact that they traded up in the third round, they give up 2 fourth-round picks to go get Trey Sermon. And now Sermon is the running back with more team investment than anybody else on this depth chart. You go, okay, he does have a real shot here to be the starting running back. You have to go, okay, what would the production look like if he is all of a sudden the starting running back in San Francisco? We know that it's kind of a cliche at this point to be targeting the starting running back in a Kyle Shanahan system. And I know a lot of people want to point at the recent failures of those running backs and go, hey, but Raheem Mostert didn't do it. Hey, but Jerick McKinnon didn't do it. Hey, but Tevin Coleman wasn't able to get it done. And what I'm saying to that is, do you hear the names you're saying? Do you hear the running back names you're bringing up in trying to discredit what the starting running back for Kyle Shanahan can do? You're saying because an undrafted player didn't get it done, that a player like Trey Sermon is not going to be able to? So I want to not just completely discredit that analysis, but I want to make sure that people understand that just because a running back in the past did not get it done for Kyle Shanahan doesn't mean Trey Sermon is going to fall in that same boat. Now, the concern that I have with Trey Sermon is the fact that, yes, you can look that he is 215 pounds, and that is exciting. But on the flip side of that, you throw in the fact that he is 6 foot, then you look at his BMI, and you look at his BMI under 30. And that is a concern, because over on our rookie draft guide that you can find on Patreon, we did some historical research on finding what makes a top 12 running back. And there were some key important factors that we were looking for. Specifically, as a rookie coming into the NFL, what you found is these running backs generally had the BMI over 30. They had a minimum requisite of a 4.60 40-yard dash. They were drafted in the third round or higher of the NFL draft, and they were able to account for 8.5% of their team targets in college, just to prove that they have the receiving capability. Now, in the case of Trey Sermon, he checks a couple boxes. He checks the box of getting that team investment that can indicate that he can have the opportunity at the next level. He checks the box of being a decent pass-catching running back, getting almost 8.5% of his team's targets. We are giving him a little bit of a pass here, given the fact that he was playing with rushing quarterbacks. Rushing quarterbacks are not going to be checking the ball down nearly as much as a pocket passer. So we are going to give him the box checked for his receiving game capability. But in the case of his size, the BMI is under 30, and he is not an elite player in terms of his speed. Now, yes, he has enough speed, but it's not something that's going to blow you away. And generally, those are going to be the 4 most predictable things when you are trying to evaluate rookie running backs coming into the NFL. Now, if you look at where Trey Sermon is actually getting drafted, I thought that the hype would be a lot more than what it currently is. I think at this point, you can actually say that Trey Sermon may not necessarily be a value, but at the very minimum, he is someone that can live up to his ADP, and he is someone that, if everything breaks right, he could crush. He could be a league winner. And for that reason, I'm going to say that we are neutral on where he is going in drafts right now, I don't want to say that we are going to be significantly higher or lower than consensus. I think his current price point is completely fine. And I know that's a boring take, but a lot of times an ADP for a player is going to be correct. It's not like every single player is undervalued or overvalued. I mean, a lot of times the market is correct with these player evaluations. Okay, so now let's get to our last guy. Let's talk about a player that I have not shut up about all offseason. Let's talk about Trey Lance. Now here with Trey Lance, I mean, it is so exciting. We have already gone through this entire offense looking at above average players across the board through the entire offense, not to mention that they have one of the best coaches in the NFL, not to mention that they have one of the better offensive lines in the entire NFL. Now, Trey Lance, they have so much invested here where they traded the 12th overall pick and 2 future first round picks. I want to keep in mind that, guys, who went with the 11th overall selection? Who went at 11? One pick before you had the 49ers moving that selection and 2 additional first to get Trey Lance. I mean, Justin Fields. Essentially, you had the 49ers paying 2 extra first to move from Justin Fields to Trey Lance. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to hate that we are even bringing that up, but it's something that you can look at. It's something that's fair to say. Now, nonetheless, here with Trey Lance, he has that team investment. He has an elite situation. We've already talked about him having the arm strength, but most importantly, he has the rushing capability to put up points like a Lamar Jackson, like a Jalen Hurts. And if you are going to check out our rookie redraft guide over there on Patreon, our rookie dynasty guide over there on Patreon, you're going to find that we've done some research on how important rushing is at the quarterback position in today's age in fantasy. And Trey Lance has exactly what you were looking for there. So Trey Lance, I'm going to continue to hammer this all offseason now. If there's anything I want us to be on record for this season, is that we are higher than consensus on Trey Lance. Buy. If he starts early enough, say he gets in the game in week 2 or week 3, similar to Justin Herbert last year, Trey Lance can be the offensive rookie of the year quite easily, to be honest, given the fact that this situation is so great coming in, given the fact that Trey Lance does have that rushing upside. So yeah, Lance, I mean, it's hard to find a quarterback with as much upside late in drafts. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I will see y'all with our video tomorrow. Thank you so much for everyone supporting the show on Patreon. And Dominic, Jim, Carl, Jesse, Tyler, Eric, Colby, Cameron, Mike, and Marcus, thank you guys.